For just a moment, set aside everything you've ever been told about what men desire. Release all the advice about how to dress, how to speak, and the simple tricks designed to make yourself more attractive. Because today we're going to reveal something far deeper. Something so potent, vibrating at such a powerful, energetic, and psychological level that it won't simply draw a man toward you. It will make him genuinely, unavoidably obsessed with you. There exists a feminine energy, a magnetic force that very few women know they carry, and even fewer understand how to activate. It is not beauty, it is not intelligence, it is not kindness. It is something far more fundamental, far more authentic, far more addictive. And do you know why no one has ever told you about it? Because this power cannot be imitated. It cannot be manufactured. It can only be awakened from within. Today, I'm not here to hand you simple advice. Today, I'm going to offer you 5 sacred truths that form the very code of this energy. Every truth you are about to receive is a key, one that unlocks a new dimension of your magnetic power and shows you how to stop being merely an option and start becoming an unforgettable presence. Are you ready? Let's begin. The first secret, the great lie of fragile femininity. Were you raised to be a shelter instead of an empire? If you have ever felt that in order to be loved, you needed to be sweet, selfless, patient, quiet, and endlessly giving, you are not alone. And it was never your fault. You were conditioned from childhood. You were taught to be agreeable, to keep others satisfied, to nurture them, to manage their emotional worlds. You were trained to become someone else's emotional sanctuary, even when it required abandoning your own truth, rather than constructing your own empire. And so, without ever realizing it, you built an idea of womanhood that didn't genuinely represent you, but made you feel secure. A version of yourself vibrating at a low frequency, socially acceptable, yet quietly diminished. Until the day a brutal truth arrived. You realized that despite pouring all your love into someone, he didn't stay. Despite being loyal, warm, devoted, and consistently present, he never became obsessed with you. And in that moment, your soul begins to stir. Something doesn't fit. Because you did everything correctly and still became just an option. So you ask yourself, why? Let me share a story that may feel uncomfortably familiar. Aylin was 31. Her partner told her she was his peace, his ideal companion, the woman he truly loved. Aylin cooked for him, listened deeply, supported him unconditionally. She offered him more care than she gave herself. She had become his emotional anchor, the stabilizing force in his life, his psychological mother. She believed this was mature love. Until one ordinary day, he simply left, without drama, without conflict. And shortly after, he became completely obsessed with another woman. A woman who appeared more emotionally distant, more focused on her own world, less predictable. Aylin shattered from the inside. She couldn't understand how someone who had received everything from her could be replaced by someone who seemed to offer so little. And that's when she arrived at one of the most merciless truths of all. A man does not become obsessed with the woman who soothes him. He becomes obsessed with the woman who awakens him. What had appeared to be real love was actually a disguise for self-abandonment. And just like Aylin, you were never meant to be someone's emotional sedative. You were never meant to be the endlessly forgiving good girl. You were born to be a mirror, a force, an energy field that simply cannot be ignored. When a woman operates from fragile femininity, she radiates an energy of absolute availability. She is always there. She always says yes. She is always ready to give. But while this frequency may appear noble, it makes you predictable. And what is predictable never transforms into emotional obsession. But when you awaken, when you recognize that you were shaped to be pleasant rather than powerful, and consciously choose to become something greater, everything shifts. You no longer apologize for your intensity. You no longer soften your character to avoid making someone uncomfortable. You no longer suppress your desire to shine out of fear that it might push him away. You move through the world as if your energy is already enough, because it is. You no longer wait for him to choose you, because you have already chosen yourself first. And for a man who has spent his entire life surrounded by accommodating women, this is an emotional revelation. Because a woman who vibrates from her authenticity, who refuses to be domesticated, who desires an empire rather than a shelter, becomes what Carl Jung called an archetypal force, a manifestation of an elevated anima, one that neither submits nor simply adapts, one that simultaneously inspires and unsettles. The greatest pain does not come from him not choosing you. It comes from betraying yourself in order to make him choose you. And you are no longer here to betray yourself. You are here to reclaim every piece of yourself you surrendered out of fear of not being enough. Today, as you absorb these words, perhaps you recognize yourself. Perhaps you remember that relationship where you were incredibly good, incredibly available, incredibly devoted, and it still didn't work. Good, because this moment is not a wound. It is a signal that you are ready to stop being the emotional sanctuary of someone who never truly recognized your light. You are ready to fully embody your sovereign, untamed energy without fearing that it will drive him away. Because if it does, he was never meant for you. And when you make that leap, when you release the version of yourself shaped to please others and transform into a woman who already loves herself, you enter an entirely different dimension of power. You are no longer the one begging for space. You are the one who creates it. The second secret, the power of the queen on her throne. Why does a man become obsessed with the woman who doesn't need him, rather than the one who does? The woman who doesn't need becomes the one who is needed. A woman can be beautiful, magnetic, giving, even unconditional in her love. But if her energy vibrates from a place of need, she will never be perceived as truly magnetic. She will simply be seen as available. And here is a ruthless truth that no one ever taught you. A man does not become obsessed with what he has secured. He becomes obsessed with what he fears losing. The woman who doesn't require being chosen is the woman who is never forgotten. And this doesn't happen through strategy. through playing games, or through cheap mystery tactics. It happens when her energy reflects this truth without needing a single word. I am whole. You can add something, but you are not my center. This is the most compelling, energetic message a man's subconscious mind can receive. And I'm going to explain why through the lens of Carl Jung's vision. According to Jung, every person projects the most powerful aspects of their unconscious onto another. When a man encounters a woman who is the queen of her own universe, with her passions, her boundaries, her confidence, her power, and her vision, something ancient activates within him. Not physical, but symbolic. A primal drive toward pursuit. His desire is not directed at her body. It is directed at her unyielding energetic field. And this is what so many women have not yet understood. They believe that if they give more, if they become more available, if they solve more of his problems, if they become everything to him, then he won't leave. But this doesn't create obsession. It creates comfort. Obsession is created by a woman who doesn't orbit anyone. She has her own sun. And if a man wants to remain close to her, he must rise to the level of her energetic field. Let me share Pellin's story. Pellin was 36. She was an independent life coach with a rich, full existence, meaningful projects, deep friendships, and a life brimming with purpose. One day, she met Jem, charismatic, seductive, emotionally intelligent. At first, Jem was completely captivated by her energy. But gradually, Pellin began compromising. She started prioritizing every meeting with him, rearranging her own schedule, surrendering her sacred time just to remain accessible. Little by little, she stopped tending to her own inner world and began orbiting his instead. And what had once been admiration slowly became routine. Jem never said it aloud, but his subconscious registered the shift. Pellin was no longer the queen. She had become the devoted servant of his needs. Until one day, after a meaningless argument, Jem stopped reaching out. Pellin was devastated. She couldn't comprehend how, after giving so much, he could simply drift away. Until she understood the one truth that transformed her life. The moment I stopped choosing myself so that he would choose me, I stopped being his obsession. And you know this too. You know that every time you abandoned your throne for the sake of love, you became invisible. But you also know what happens when you return to yourself. When you restart your own schedule, your own passions, your own joy. When you reconnect with your body, your intuition, your own approval. When you look in the mirror and declare, "This universe is mine, and whoever enters must honor the temple," everything changes. Because a woman who lives as her own queen doesn't attract attention, she commands it. Not through her physical appearance or her behavior, but because her energetic throne is firmly established. Her frequency simply feels different. She doesn't chase. She doesn't demand. She simply radiates. And men who have grown accustomed to women who dissolve themselves in the pursuit of love are genuinely startled by a woman who already loves herself, whose life is so rich, so full, so overflowing with joy and purpose that a man's presence is not an achievement, but a conscious choice. That woman doesn't need external validation. She affirms herself every single day. And for a man, this is utterly irresistible. Because what energy can possibly compete with a woman who is not afraid of being alone? None. So hear this clearly. Stop believing that you need to empty yourself for him to choose you. Your magnetism does not lie in how much you accommodate. It lives in how faithfully you remain true to yourself. Return to your passions. Reclaim your sacred spaces. Stop responding instantly to every message. Stop explaining every silence. Stop trying to prove your worth. And begin living as though your energy is a privilege, because it is. When you inhabit this state of inner abundance, he notices, and he begins asking himself, "Am I worthy of her world?" And that is precisely when emotional obsession is born. Not through manipulation, but because you have become a universe. And no one who has ever truly touched a universe can simply forget it. The third secret, the mystery of your inner ocean. Become a universe he can never finish exploring. A man can forget a touch, a glance, even a body. But what he can never forget is the presence of a soul that guided him through an ocean he didn't know existed. Because a woman who genuinely nurtures mystery is not fed by surface appearances. She is a spiritual lighthouse that illuminates without demanding anything in return. She doesn't offer herself completely all at once. Not because she is playing games, but because she respects herself deeply. And here is something no one has ever explained to you. A man's soul does not become obsessed with something that surrenders entirely. It becomes obsessed with something that reveals itself in layers. Carl Jung believed that the human unconscious carries a profound need for connection with what is luminous, what is sacred, what cannot be fully comprehended. And a woman who embodies this energy, whose inner world is alive and vivid, who is more than her exterior, who cannot be predicted or controlled, activates the part of a man that wants to explore everything, yet never quite succeeds. Because she is not a book read in a single evening. She is a 1,000-page epic that only the worthy are permitted to open. Let me share a story to help you feel this truth. Zeynep was 31, a visual artist. She wasn't the most popular, the most conventionally beautiful, or the most talkative in any room. But when she entered a space, everyone felt her. She carried a deep stillness, a gaze that seemed to hold quiet secrets, a voice that was soft yet unwavering. As if every word she spoke had roots. When she conversed with a man, she never rushed. She never sought approval. She never tried to impress. She was simply there, fully present, completely inhabiting her own expanding universe. One day she met Jim, successful, self-assured, a man accustomed to women immediately drawn to his charm. But Zeynep was different. She wouldn't write to him the following day. She wouldn't share stories designed to capture his attention. She wouldn't justify herself when she didn't respond. And this didn't push him away. It made him obsessed. Because for the first time in years, he felt he couldn't fully read someone. Every conversation with her felt like a doorway opening onto something deeper. She spoke about her passions, but never revealed everything. She shared her emotions, but with a graceful restraint. She laughed freely, but also held silence without discomfort. And this left him completely disarmed. What others might have perceived as emotional distance, Jim experienced as an irresistible puzzle. And puzzles are never ignored. They are solved. Zeynep was not distant. She was magnetic, because her energy didn't say, "Look at me." It whispered, Discover me if you're capable." And so he entered, slowly, into an emotional, psychological, and vibrational universe that could not be purchased, forced, or conquered in a single moment. This is the secret. A man becomes obsessed with a woman who doesn't reveal everything, because he senses that behind her laughter there is a story. Behind her stillness there are battles already won. Behind her presence there is an entire temple. And this has nothing to do with withholding things deliberately. It is about possessing an inner world, a language only you speak, a corner of your soul that not everyone is permitted to enter. A woman like this cannot be explained. She can only be felt, and she is remembered forever. The fourth secret, the dance of the sun and the shadow. The art of giving your warmth and knowing precisely when to withdraw it so he understands its value. A woman who is always available, always eager, always saying yes, becomes invisible. Not because she lacks worth, but because her worth is never felt through absence. And here is a ruthless truth. A man stops needing what he always has access to. But the moment he senses the possibility of losing it, he begins craving it with his entire soul. This is not about playing games. This is about understanding the natural rhythm of feminine energy. Feminine energy moves like the sun. It shines, it warms, it nourishes. But it also has cycles. It does not remain frozen at high noon. It has its descents, its evenings, its periods of darkness. And it is precisely in that mystical shift between light and shadow that genuine fascination is born. Carl Jung spoke extensively about the integration of the shadow as one of the foundational pillars of reaching wholeness. And this dance between giving and withdrawing, between presence and absence, between warmth and silence, is the way a powerful woman integrates her own shadow, not as a destructive darkness, but as a revealing absence. Because when you understand yourself as the sun, you recognize that you don't need to shine for 24 hours in order to be loved. Real power is knowing when to illuminate and when to disappear, so that the value of your fire is truly understood. Let me share a story that makes this truth undeniable. Elif was 29, a life coach. She was in a relationship with Jung, a man who was interested but never fully committed. He would reach out when it suited him and see her when it was convenient. Elif, terrified of losing him, remained consistently warm, consistently available, consistently attentive. But deep inside, every time she acted this way, she lost a little more of herself. Until one quiet day, Elif made a silent decision. She wasn't going to leave, but she was going to reclaim her energy. She remained loving, but no longer perpetually reachable. She responded when she genuinely wanted to, not simply because she felt she had to. She was present, but with clear boundaries. She stopped sharing everything with him and began keeping certain things sacred, just for herself. And then Jung felt it. He sensed that Elif's light was no longer burning exclusively for him around the clock. He felt her vibrational withdrawal. He felt the emptiness where certainty once lived. And that emptiness shook him more profoundly than any argument ever could. because arguments create distance, but the absence of emotional energy causes a man to wake up. Gradually, he began calling more, writing more, asking how she was. Not because Elif had pressured him, but because her energy had become scarce. And what is scarce, what cannot be easily obtained, is valued. This is the essential point. A woman who understands this, who stops giving without measure and begins managing her warmth as a genuine gift, transforms into a vibrational magnet. Because a man's soul does not become obsessed with something that surrenders itself endlessly without pause. It becomes obsessed with something that sometimes emerges fully and sometimes quietly withdraws. And in that cycle of presence and retreat, his subconscious begins associating your energy with something he simply cannot control. And everything he cannot control draws him in at the deepest level. This is not advice for manipulation. It is an invitation to become sacred to yourself once more. When you give everything without restraint, you become depleted. But when you offer only what truly resonates, you expand. And that expansion is not always outward. Sometimes it is the act of turning inward, of reconnecting with yourself, of closing your energetic circle, so that when you emerge again, your light is not merely seen, it is treasured. Remember this always. The sun does not ask permission to shine, but it also offers no apology for setting. Magnetic feminine energy is not static. It is cyclical, instinctive, and alive. And a man does not become obsessed with something that functions like a permanent emotional appliance, always on, always ready. He becomes obsessed with something that sometimes nourishes him completely and sometimes leaves him hungry. Because that hunger is not a punishment. It is what teaches him your value. And this changes everything. The fifth and final secret, the embodiment of pleasure. The last secret, become obsessed with yourself and he will follow your example. There is something that very few women have understood at a vibrational level. Your pleasure is not a luxury. It is your highest frequency. And when I speak of pleasure, I am not speaking only of physical desire. I am speaking about the joy of being alive, the art of walking down a street with a quiet smile already living in your chest, of laughing to yourself while making coffee in the morning, of moving through the world with an energy that seeks no one's approval, because you have already chosen yourself. A woman who has become genuinely devoted to her own peace, her own beauty, her own spiritual evolution, her own becoming, radiates a vibrational frequency so magnetic that she no longer needs to attract attention. She provokes it without even trying. Carl Jung once said that what is not made conscious appears in your life as fate. And if you never consciously claim your right to experience pleasure, to shine, to enjoy yourself without guilt, you will continue drawing relationships designed to extinguish your light, simply because you haven't yet recognized that you are the light. But when you transform pleasure into a sacred daily practice, your entire energetic field shifts. Because here is the great secret. A man does not become obsessed with a woman who desperately desires him. He becomes obsessed with a woman who is already complete, who is genuinely in love with her own existence, and who sees him not as her salvation, but as a beautiful extension of a life already overflowing. And for this to happen, There is only one thing you need to practice: becoming devoted to yourself, devoted to your own growth, devoted to your own well-being, devoted to the way you tend to yourself, devoted to your quiet yet undeniable power. Let me share the story of Asli. She was 36. After emerging from a relationship that had shattered her confidence entirely, she made one unwavering promise to herself: I will never beg for love again. I will give to myself first. And she took that promise seriously. She began caring for her body like a temple, not for aesthetics, but out of genuine respect. She learned to dress for herself, not to impress others. She began dancing alone in her apartment, writing letters she would never send, speaking to her own reflection in the mirror. She enrolled in an art class she had postponed for years. She traveled alone. She sat in silence. She learned to say, I don't want to see anyone today. Today, I want to be with myself. And at a moment she never anticipated, her entire frequency shifted. People began looking at her differently. Her closest friends told her she was radiant. Men approached her not because of her appearance, but because of her presence, her aura, the quiet energy that surrounded her. And the man who had once barely offered her the smallest crumb of attention reappeared and said, I don't know what you've done, but I cannot stop thinking about you. Do you know what she had done? She had placed herself at the center of her own world. And that was more seductive than any strategy, any game, any calculated move could ever be. Because a man can encounter thousands of beautiful, kind, or intelligent women, but when he meets a woman who has fully embodied the joy of being herself, who isn't searching to be understood, but is simply radiating truth, something activates in his subconscious that he cannot resist. That woman doesn't chase him, but she doesn't hide either. She simply moves through life with such profound self-love that he feels invited into a universe that doesn't need him, but has consciously chosen him. And that is precisely when genuine emotional obsession is born. Not from her physical qualities or her charm, but from her energy. Because she never betrays herself in order to appear pleasing. She never explains her boundaries to justify them. And she never sacrifices her peace in order to hold someone close. Her energy simply declares, I am whole here. If you come, bring something real. If you don't, I will continue soaring. And dear heart, that is irresistible. A man's subconscious is not searching for a woman to carry him, nor is it searching for a woman to beg at his feet. It is searching for a feminine energy that reminds him what it means to live with purpose, with feeling, with soul. A woman who genuinely delights in herself, who reflects inner abundance, who makes him feel, if being with her feels like this, I don't want to be anywhere else. But for this to happen, you must become that place. A vibration, a field of genuine safety, a fire nourished by your own inner dance, a peaceful body, an unguarded soul, a woman who no longer shrinks to fit, but expands to inspire. This is how your energy transforms into an effortless kind of magic. This is how you stop asking, "Will he like me?" and begin understanding that you are not here to be liked. You are here to shine. And whoever has the eyes to see will see. Whoever doesn't will remain in their own blindness. But you are no longer dimming yourself. Now you know, and there is no going back. Because the moment a woman discovers she doesn't need to chase, to please, or to reshape herself, but instead must reign from her own authenticity, her own pleasure, her own energy, something in her vibrational field changes permanently. You are no longer content with being the safe option. You no longer surrender your light in order to be accepted. You no longer ask permission to shine. And no, this is not arrogance. This is awareness. This is the kind of energy that is born not from neediness, but from inner magic. The kind that awakens the deepest emotional and psychological obsession in him. The kind he feels but cannot control. And that energy, dear soul, already lives inside you. You don't need to invent it. You simply need to remember it. So today, let me ask you to seal this awakening with your own words. Write it in the comments out loud. Today, I choose to become the woman who chooses herself, even if he doesn't. Subscribe to Carl Jung Philosophy to continue elevating your frequency with every new video. And share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Take care of yourself. You are the universe. And the universe needs no one's permission to exist. Before we close, I want to leave something with you that goes beyond strategy, beyond secrets, beyond any list of things to do or avoid. Because what we've explored today is not a technique. It is a remembering, a return to something that was always yours, long before anyone told you to make yourself smaller, quieter, more agreeable, more digestible. Carl Jung once wrote something that I want you to sit with for a moment. He said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Think about that. Not the most difficult thing, the most terrifying. Because somewhere deep within us, we have been taught that our fullness is dangerous, that our intensity is too much, that our desires, our boundaries, our unapologetic presence will push people away. And so we learned to edit ourselves, to offer a softer, more palatable version, one that fits comfortably into the expectations of others. But Jung understood that this editing, this constant self-betrayal in the name of acceptance, is what truly costs us everything. Not just in relationships, in life itself. There is another truth Jung offered that I believe every woman needs to hear. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. How many times have you looked at a pattern in your relationships and thought, "Why does this keep happening to me? Why do I always end up giving more than I receive?" Why do I always attract men who cannot fully see me? The answer, as Jung reminds us, is never entirely outside of us. The patterns we repeat are the ones we have not yet brought into the light, the wounds we have not yet named, the parts of ourselves we continue to reject. And the profound beauty of this truth is that it carries within it the seed of complete liberation. Because if the pattern began inside you, it can also end inside you. You hold that power entirely. Psychologist Abraham Maslow once observed that what a man can be, he must be. And I believe the same applies to every woman. What you are capable of becoming, the fullness, the sovereignty, the radiant self-possession that already lives inside you, is not optional. It is a calling. And every time you silence it, every time you shrink to fit someone else's comfort, a part of you quietly grieves. So before you move on from this moment, I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Not for me, but for yourself. Which version of yourself have you been presenting to the world? The one shaped by fear, or the one rooted in truth? Where in your life are you still waiting for someone else's permission to fully exist? And what would change in your relationships, in your energy, in the way you move through the world, if you decided, starting today, that your presence is not something to be earned or justified, but something to be lived? Write your answer in the comments, because your words matter. Your awakening matters. And this community at Carl Jung Philosophy exists for exactly this: to remind you again and again that the most magnetic, the most unforgettable, the most deeply irresistible version of you is simply the one that is most fully, most fearlessly, most unapologetically yourself.